Welcome, everyone, to Connect, the podcast for California MBA, where strategy, innovation, and leadership come together to shape the future of mortgage finance. This is where the voices and ideas driving our industry forward meet real-world execution. My name is Paul Gigliotti, CEO of the California MBA, and if you're here, you care about building a better housing industry for you, your business, and the consumers. Before we jump into our Connect podcast, I want to thank our 2026 President Council sponsors whose support make these conversations possible, plus all the legislation and advocacy we do at the California MBA. So I'd like to throw a shout out to AmeriHome, Consolidated Analytics, Loan DNA, Funding Shield, CMG Finance, Guild Mortgage, Rocket Mortgage, Wiener Brodsky Kinder, and Western Alliance Bank. Thank you for your continued support and partnership. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest, Coby from T360. Coby, thank you so much for being here.
So excited to be here, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So T360 has a strong voice in the real estate industry, helping leaders think through strategy, brokerage performance, marketing trends, technology data, and the future of how real estate companies are operating. And I think this is a very timely conversation. In mortgage, we talk a lot about rates, volume, affordability, inventory, but we can't have a full conversation about mortgage without talking about what is happening in real estate. And so we're thrilled to have you here, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's dive on in, my friend. Sound good?
Sounds great. And by the way, that list of sponsors, that's like a who's who.
It's a who's who, right?
They're pretty incredible. Yeah. You know, when you see kind of the second tier sports and their sponsors are like, you know, Doug's Kitchen and like Al's Tire Repair, like, you know, it's legit when you've got names like Guild and CMG and Rocket. Like that's legit. I'm on a legit show. I better bring my A game today.
Yeah, you got to bring your A game, big guy. Yeah. So, you know, what's really impressive about our President Council sponsors is, I guess, you know, they talk the walk, right? They're really involved in the California MBA. They're really proponents of advocacy, and they're there at every conversation. And, you know, we're doing a lot right now from a legislative perspective with, you know, the May revise and the rebuild and a lot of proposed bills on the docket. And they're there providing data, CMG, Guild, you know, they're part of all of our committees. And what's impressive is their participation in the industry, Funding Shield, Consolidated Analytics. So I'm glad you brought that up because it is important to see organizations such as T360 that really care about the industry and are not there just to make a buck, but are there to really participate. So it says a lot about the organizations.
Absolutely.
So let's start with the market. Mortgage lenders are feeling the pressure from, you know, rates, affordability, zero inventory, low inventory, no movement, lower transaction volume. But real estate brokerages and agents are living through that same pressure from a different angle. Mm-hmm. So from your seat, what is the real estate industry really focused on right now? And what are brokerage leaders and agents trying to solve for in this market?
Yeah. You know, if you're a realtor, what you don't have that mortgage does is the hope of rates dropping and a refi boom. So, you know, that's to add to that pressure of what it's like being in the real estate industry right now. You know, we're one war ending away from potentially seeing rates creep back into the fives and a whole bunch of people being in the money for refinances in the real estate industry. Maybe not. People will come into the market, but if we don't have enough inventory, will those extra people coming into the market just push prices up? There's always that fear. I think the real estate industry does have a lot of similar concerns to mortgage. The profitability is down. The EBITDA of the average real estate brokerage is hovering around 0 to 3%. That's most brokerages, according to the most recent affordability study that we ran. You know, they're in a position where they're paying a lot for their agents in terms of the commission. Most agents are either capping out or they're making 100% or they're lead driven. And there's not a lot of commission revenue to go around. And there's certainly not a lot in mortgage either, but real estate actually has less. The average real estate brokerage makes on a per deal basis something like $500 or $600. we're about $700 or $800 in mortgage. So, they're squeezed even tighter than we are, with not a lot of room to run. What they're thinking about now on the agent level, it's, I'm coming into year number 3 or 4 of 4 million, 4.1 million transactions. That pie doesn't seem to be growing exponentially. It seems to be, kind of creeping along. Maybe we'll be at 4.2, 4.3 next year. The average real estate agent, 71% of real estate agents in the last year, closed 1 or 0 deals. So think about that. That's, we have the 80-20 rule. They have the 30-70 rule, but the 70% are doing almost no business. So, that's a lot of realtors out there that are walking around with licenses that are just either not practicing at all or have given up. And, we'll see how many of them renew.
Yeah.
So it's a tough business. We obviously see on the macro level tons of consolidation happening. Compass now, with if you count the franchisees, Compass now has somewhere close to a 30% market share. And by the way, the parallel to mortgages, we saw that in mortgage 10, 15 years ago with Wells Fargo having that kind of market share. So as the mortgage industry gets defragmented, whereas no single company has more than single-digit market share, real estate's doing the opposite, with Real acquiring Remax, Next Home and EXP, Compass and Anywhere, and now we're seeing some of that bleed into mortgage, where Compass and Rocket have a deal that they're working together with the Rocket Pro. So there's a lot going on in real estate around that consolidation. We're seeing some of that consolidation on a smaller scale in mortgage. But the realtors are really trying to figure out, and I say realtors, those are NAR realtors, so I should say real estate agents, but the agents and the brokerages, they're trying to figure out, how do we get in front of all that inventory? How do we control that inventory? There's the wars between the brokerages and the portals and the MLS that really has no analogy in mortgage. That's super fascinating and has implications. But if you're a mortgage company and you're watching what's going on in real estate, if you're Origin Point, the JV for guaranteed rate, and you had a JV or you have one with Compass, and now they've just struck a deal with Rocket, well, what does that mean for you? Same thing if you're CMG, one of the sponsors, and you've got JVs, and now one of your JV partners now works for a different, or is under the umbrella of a different brokerage than they were just a month ago. These are things that we should be paying attention to in the mortgage industry, because these have real world implications for how we do business.
Yeah, it totally impacts, mortgage lenders, and not just from the relationship perspective. And I do want to get into that, because I think that's an important topic to bring to the mortgage industry, which is predominantly who's going to be watching this podcast, is the relationship between originators and realtors. It's interesting. I was on the phone with John Rogers of Cotality today, and we were talking about the May revise and the rebuild that we're going through with our construction lenders for Southern California wildfires victims. And we were talking about the landscape and how that's changing for real estate agents and what that looks like. And you brought, front a lot of that, what the change, what is occurring in regards to that change. What do you think the outcome is going to be? Because the real estate industry is not standing still, right? Mm-hmm. And on the mortgage side, we're seeing a ton of consolidation. We're going to see more consolidation, I believe, in the tech side. We're hearing about consolidation in the real estate side, and we're hearing about, some of those boutique real estate brokerage companies having, problems standing still alone in a silo and moving over to the larger organizations. What is your global picture, just real quick, for those real estate brokers? Do you think there's going to be more consolidation? Do you think there's going to be stronger JVs, less JV? Like, what is your outlook on that?
Yeah, the trend certainly indicates more consolidation. The trend certainly indicates that the mid-tier brokerages and the larger brokerages and some of the larger legacy brokerages there's still some maneuvering that's going to go on. The founder of our company, Stefan Swanepoel, who's been, a real estate oracle for 5 decades now, says that he thinks we're going to wind up with a version that looks similar to the airlines, where we have these 4 major airlines and then maybe, some regional carriers underneath it.
Yeah.
If it, and that remains to be seen. The reality is we don't really know right now because we're going through such a period of transition. And again, it's not just the consolidation of the brokerages themselves, but you have to take into account what are the portals which factor heavily into real estate. What do they look like in 5 or 10 years? What do the MLSs look like in 5 or 10 years? There's four
Yeah.
major portals. There's Zillow, Realtor.com, Homes.com, and Redfin. Those are the four big portals. And then you've got 484 MLSs across the country, covering all 3,000 counties within the United States. So there's probably a ton of consolidation to happen amongst the MLSs as well. The MLSs are now fighting with some of the brokerages, and there's a lot of talk about the private listing network and what's best for the consumer and where does that all go. What it boils down to, though, because we could talk about each of those subjects for an hour at least, is that there's a fight for the inventory and a fight for the eyeballs of the consumer. That's why Rocket bought Redfin. That's why
Right.
Compass is at war with Zillow. Zillow wants control of the inventory. Compass wants to keep it on the ground level. And I think that if you're in mortgage and you're looking at this and you're wondering what those relationships are going to be, I think it's good for mortgage ultimately, because I think real estate is coming to the realization that we need to be more out in front of the customer. We need to figure out more innovative ways to make money, because we're just as in mortgage, in some cases, we're voluming ourselves into a grave. The more business we do, the less money we seem to be making in some cases. So there needs to be more vertical integration between the two industries. We're seeing pockets of that all over the place. Rocket and Redfin is obviously the biggest example.
Right.
Guild in California, another example of doing that. Movoto, lower. There's a lot of iterations of it happening, and I think we're going to see a lot more. If you've got a JV with a real estate company that is now owned by a different owner, sit tight and see what happens there. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities opening up, because in a shifting dynamic landscape, what always comes along with that is opportunity.
Yep.
And
I totally agree. Yeah.
and if the end game is to get in front of the consumer, and you're a mortgage company and you understand that it's a relationship based business, and you understand that 80% of our customers that we close in mortgage never come back to us, and in real estate, guess what that number is? 80%. So if you can figure out how to get together with a real estate partner and solve for that problem and lower the customer acquisition costs, you're going to be in great shape.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love that you stated that. I hope that's a highlight for everyone in this during our conversation. Shifts bring opportunity. It's not a time to clam up and have fear, because it's a dynamic. It's a difference and it's a change. And if you approach that in any line of business, it doesn't have to just be mortgage, real estate, finance, whatever the case is. If you approach it with eyes wide open, and excitement, you'll find the opportunity. I often talk about Deep Haven. Deep Haven, one of the largest non-QM, non-agency lenders, was founded in a shift when other lenders were scrambling and thinking that they had to close down and things were going to change when Dodd-Frank came into play. And that founder of Deep Haven, turned around and said, there's something different here. There's something that we can do that will support our needs and the consumer's needs. And this is what it is in a shifting, changing market. So I absolutely agree with that statement. Makes you, to me, all the more wiser that you made that statement. I really appreciate it.
All right. I
Let's
know I've had to battle back for some points with you, so I appreciate that.
Let's touch base really quickly about the relationship side. For loan officers, the relationship with real estate agents have always, for a lot of loan officers, depending on the shop, but most loan officers really, put a lot of emphasis on that relationship with real estate agents. But in this market, I think the relationship has to be much more intentional.
Yeah.
It can't just be, open houses and taking them out to coffee and things of that nature. Like when I was COO at Pinnacle Home Loans 5 years ago, that's what we pushed our loan officers to do. It's different. Loan officers have to bring value, education, product knowledge, not only to the real estate agent, but to the consumers. What are agents looking for in lender partners right now from your perspective?
I think, to your point, and I started in this business as a loan officer, and I originated loans for a long time, and then I led loan officers for a long time. I don't think that the core components of that relationship have changed, in that it's communication, it's integrity, it's partnership, it's honesty, it's leadership, it's all of the nice words that look good on a pitch deck. But what has evolved is that the customer journey has gotten more complex. And at first blush, you would say, well, why? We have mobile apps, we have downloadable bank statements, we have tax returns that are sitting on our desktop. So it's gotten easier for the customer. But the reality is, when a customer enters into the journey to buy a home, and that's what they want to do, by the way, they want to buy a home. They don't want to have a great loan experience. They want to have a great real estate experience. They want to buy a house. And when they enter into that, they now enter, in our modern time, they enter into dual technological journeys that can be complex. You're getting DocuSign documents and all kinds of disclosures from the realtor. You're doing your due diligence on the house. At the same time, you're applying for a loan 75% of the time, the non-cash transactions. You're applying for a loan, and you're getting a link to a borrower portal where you've got to upload your documents and guess what? Review disclosures. And you've got these dual technical journeys that can be really complex for a lot of borrowers who don't do this every day. We do it every day. To us, it's rote. To most people who do this 2, 3, 4 times in their lifetime, it's very complex. And we're asking them to download apps. We're asking them to click on links. We're asking them to conduct uploads. We may be doing Zoom calls with them. We're asking them to sign their appraisal disclosure thing so that they can close on time. And here's your CD. And if you don't acknowledge the CD in time, you're not going to be able to close on time. And here's your LE. And then on the real estate side, there's all of that that's going on as well. And that dual workflow journey can be very complex and very harrowing. And the proof that it is in the exasperation of a borrower after they close a loan, because again, 80% of them don't go back and use the same loan officer, the real estate agent. They may say, hey, that experience was fine, but that was a lot and I don't want to do it again. And the trauma can be so deep that 88% of people don't remember their loan officer's names 12 months after the transaction. So there's some sort of blocking out of I don't want to even think about that person again. So the question is, what kind of journey are we putting our customers through? And to get back to your question of what is the value that a good loan officer can provide to an agent, it's trying to figure out, how do we make this journey, this transaction much more seamless, more frictionless, that much better? How do we put that much more attention and intention into this experience for the borrower so that when they leave, we can continue to be their loan officer, we can continue to be their agent, we can continue to provide value, and they come back to us when they're ready to do their next transaction? That's where the thinking of every loan officer and agent should be right now, is how do we make this not such a horrible experience for people? How do we actually make this enjoyable? Might be a stretch, but how do we make this so that when they get to the closing, they actually want to invite us to the housewarming party? Let's get that far.
Yeah. When you were talking, Coby, I was thinking in my head, it's important for the loan officer and real estate agent, but topic at hand, loan officer, to focus on being present. Not necessarily doing the work so that they will have this client as a repeat. Statistic I just got from Tom Davis this morning was 75% of the mortgages that go through refis that are first lien position go through the servicer, as opposed to going back to the originator. So perhaps if we were to have loan officers concentrate on, not without sounding too hippy-dippy, but being present in the current transaction and really focusing, to your point, on intentionally making this as smooth as possible, ultimately at the end of the day, they would win that customer or that consumer again, the next time. But just really focusing on communicating to the real estate agent and the consumer, or both real estate agents, buyers and sellers, this is where we are in the transaction. This is what's going on. And maybe not doing it from an automated AI robotic method, but more of a personal touch. I think that goes a long way as well.
Yeah. There's this big competition right now for eyeballs and for owning the entire funnel, having the customer's eyeballs when they start searching. That's the emotional part, when you start looking for a house and you get excited because it's got a pool and the kitchen you want, et cetera. And then all the way through servicing, owning the relationship post-closing.
Yeah.
But I think it's super important, and I've said this a few times, and I'm glad you brought that up, that we have to understand that there's still a human involved. It's not eyeballs. It's not, a customer journey. It's a person. It's a person trying to buy a home and do something really big in terms of the finances of it, and do something really big in terms of their family. When you buy your first home, when you move to a bigger home because you've had a couple of kids, those are big life moments. Life moments are what trigger buying a house. There's no question about that. And that's why I'm not a big believer in the lock-in effect. I feel like, for people who don't necessarily have to move and they've got a 3% mortgage, well, okay, it's one more reason not to move. Fine. But for the people that have to move, and we know the 7 Ds or the 8 Ds or however many Ds there are, is a lot of them. When that time comes, you're gonna find another house to buy. And we've seen that. And the proof of that is that if you look at Realtor.com's top 10 housing market activity areas for the last 6 months or 8 months, it's all in Rust Belt areas where, guess what? Industry left 30, 40 years ago. It left a lot of dead inventory, and there's houses for people to buy that are affordable. Now, those people are not going to see great appreciation in those homes. They're just not. But there is a lot of inventory, and the prices were attainable, whereas for the rest of the country, including many parts of the state you and I live in, they're not attainable, and we don't have enough inventory, and the prices keep going higher and higher, and it becomes hard to get there. Yeah. So that's why those people that need homes, they're finding homes to buy in areas that have the inventory available.
Yeah. So let's move on to something really interesting. And it will bring us back to this concept of relationship and what I would call human in the loop, or as you said, eyeballs, right? Ears and eyes, participation. Let's talk about technology. I have conversations all day long about technology and AI and data and automation in the mortgage side. On the regulation side, I'm a big proponent to bringing in technology on the advocacy side because it's oddly just not there. So it's topic of conversation. Technology only matters if it helps someone make better decisions, move faster, and create a better experience, right? That's the purpose of technology, and support the bottom line. More people can do more things in less amount of time. From the real estate side, where are you seeing technology actually make an impact, and how are consumers' expectations? So let's also bring this into the subject: consumer demand, their expectations. How is that playing into, the need for more technology and that fine line of human interaction? That's a huge mouthful. You got it all?
Yeah, I got it all. So I'll try to give you the succinct answer, or at least succinct is a good word. Real estate, where I think the biggest tech innovations are happening right now, is around a lot of customer journey and a lot of customer marketing. There's a lot of propensity data in real estate now, where if you're a listing agent and you're trying to figure out how to correctly price your home or how to correctly farm your neighborhood, or who's signaling that they might want to buy so that you can target them, whether that's within your sphere of influence or if you want to target a specific area, it's getting smarter about where realtors can find opportunities, which makes sense because, again, we haven't been growing in terms of transactions exponentially every year. We've been growing somewhat incrementally, if at all. And so you've got to dig deeper to find those transactions. So there's a lot of technology around that, a lot of technology around collaboration tools with the borrower, with the buyer, so that agents and the buyers can collaborate on home search. One of the most annoying things for a buyer is when you tell your agent, I need at least 3 bedrooms and 2 baths and this size yard, and they send you a bunch of listings that are like 3 beds and 1.5 baths with no yard, right? It's annoying for people when they feel like they're not listened to, but the agent's dealing with so many buyers doing so many things and they're setting them up on all these searches. Those things kind of fall through the cracks. So getting more data from the customer and being able to download that data and set them up on more intentional search, that's something that we're seeing a lot of in real estate. The second part of your question was about customer expectations.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people searching for properties on AI right now, which calls into question, what do the portals look like in 10 years if instead of me going on to Zillow or Realtor.com to find a home, my AI knows me because it's got 5 years of experience with me, 2 years of experience, 10 years. And all I have to do is type in and say, hey, I'm looking for a new home. Based on what you know of me, where should I move? What should my budget be? And what's the ideal house look like for me? And instead of it giving you, typical AI slop, it brings you, here's 6 listings I think you should check out. Now, if you're the real estate company, you've got to figure out, how do I get involved into that? How do I become one of the search answers, the generative optimization as opposed to search optimization, so that I'm found? So there's a lot of intention going into that. The customer expectation is that with AI and the AI tools that I can customize my experience. I can customize the house that I want or the search that I want, and that I'm going to find more ideal opportunities for buying a home than I was able to find before. And so there's a lot of expectations around technology from the customer side because everything else that we do, we use chat as our search now, and so
Yeah,
that's happening on the home search as well.
it is. And what's really interesting is it broadens ability, right? It broadens the scope for the customer or the consumer to be able to expand their search and from a certain perspective because, you know, um, answer engine optimization is much stronger than search
Hmm.
engine optimization, right? So it really is leveraging technology to expand the consumer's mindset, like where they potentially were and what they could potentially, look into. It's going to be interesting that when we start seeing that play a little bit more of a role in the mortgage side because it hasn't quite yet, right? It really hasn't quite, as a
Because
consumer,
people
you
don't know what
can't.
to ask.
Yeah, you can't punch into ChatGTP or whatever it is that you use. What should my interest rate be based on these characteristics? But
Yeah.
you'll be able to soon, and that will be really interesting to see how that transcends into a loan officer's life. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form it's going to take away loan officers, but it will, as we were talking about, provide a shift, which
Hmm.
should provide an opportunity. So, lots of changes, lots of shifts, but as you were saying, Kobe, lots of opportunity. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your perspective, your work, what you're doing in the industry, what T360 brings to the table. I also appreciate your partnership in California MBA. You're a newer member, so
That's
we're
right.
thrilled to have you aboard, and we're looking forward to bringing you into the fold more and more, and having more podcasts and stage time and participation in the community. So I want to thank you for coming into the community as well.
Great to be here. Excited to continue with the CMBA and participate in whatever I can and support the efforts. And I'm excited to see you again in person at the next thing, whatever that is.
Yeah, well, we all get to take a little bit of a break in July, but
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see you at Western Secondary. For our listeners, I think the takeaway is clear. Mortgage and real estate are connected. What happens in brokerage, in real estate brokerage, world matters to lenders, and then ultimately comes obviously to the consumer. Right? It's a triangle. What happens with agents matter to loan officers, and what happens with the consumer, affordability, technology, and trust all matter for us. This is market is forcing everyone to get sharper. And as you were saying, Kobe, much more intentional about the work that we do, which to me is very exciting. To our audience, thank you for tuning in to Connect. Advocacy is constant, innovation is constant, and in a market like this, execution matters more than ever. Until next time, stay engaged, stay sharp, and keep building with purpose. Thanks for joining us.